Daniel thought he knew everything about loyalty. For years, he'd been the one people turned to, the reliable one, the steady friend. And when his best friend Mike needed him most, Daniel didn't hesitate. He gave what only he could, a part of himself, a kidney. It seemed like the right thing to do. After all, they'd been through so much together. They weren't just friends, they were family. Daniel had always been there for Mike, just as Mike had been there for him. But what Daniel didn't know was that the very people he trusted most, the ones he'd given everything for, were hiding something that would shake his world to its core, something that was happening right under his nose. It was subtle at first, the signs too small to notice, but in time, they would become impossible to ignore. What happens when the people you trust with your life betray you? Stay with us to find out, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories that will make you question everything you thought you knew. Daniel and Mike's friendship wasn't something you could easily explain. It wasn't just built on shared experiences or the simple passing of time. It was forged in something deeper. They met when they were young, both outsiders in their own way. Mike was the outgoing one, but he carried personal struggles that Daniel could see beneath the surface. Daniel, more quiet and reserved, was the kind of friend who noticed the things others missed. Their connection grew quickly, and soon they were inseparable. It wasn't just about fun or convenience. It was about having someone who truly understood you. They spent years together, sharing apartments, supporting each other through difficult times, and facing challenges head-on. Mike had his battles with depression, and during those dark moments, Daniel was always there, silent, steady, always ready to listen. Their friendship wasn't perfect, but it was real. They didn't need words to know they had each other's back. Daniel often thought of Mike as family, his ride or die. No matter what came their way, they were in it together, never questioning each other's loyalty. But what Daniel didn't know was that this unshakable bond would soon be tested in ways he couldn't have imagined. The very people he trusted most, the ones he believed would never let him down, were about to become the source of his deepest pain. When Daniel met Emily, it felt like a natural fit. She was warm, easy to talk to, and made Daniel feel comfortable in a way he hadn't expected. Mike had introduced them, and at first, Daniel wasn't sure, but over time, Emily became a part of their shared life. Mike supported the relationship completely, making Daniel feel confident in his choice. The wedding was everything Daniel had dreamed of. Mike, as best man, gave a heartfelt speech. Laughter filled the room, and the feeling of joy was overwhelming. It was a moment Daniel would cherish forever, a symbol of the love he felt for Emily and the unbreakable bond he had with Mike. Home videos and photos captured those sweet moments, showing the three of them happy, together. But as the night went on, Daniel started to notice small things. Nothing obvious at first, just little signs that seemed out of place. Emily laughed a little too hard at Mike's jokes, and there was a look exchanged between them that lingered a second too long. It was nothing big, but there was something about it that didn't sit right. At the time, Daniel brushed it off, but deep down, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was subtly off. The tension was barely noticeable, but it was there. Mike's health had been declining for months, but it wasn't until a routine checkup that the truth came to light. Mike was diagnosed with kidney disease. The doctors explained the situation plainly. Without a transplant, his condition would continue to worsen. They also made it clear that Mike was on the donor list, but the wait could be long. Time, however, was running out. When Daniel heard the news, the weight of it hit him hard. Mike wasn't just his friend, he was family. Without hesitation, Daniel offered to be the kidney donor. He knew the risks, but there was no question in his mind. He couldn't stand by and watch his best friend suffer when he could help. The decision was an act of pure love and loyalty. Daniel didn't think twice. He believed that Mike would do the same for him if the roles were reversed. This was the ultimate sacrifice, one that would save Mike's life, but it would also change everything between them in ways Daniel couldn't yet understand. The days after the surgery were filled with a mix of hope and slow recovery. Mike was regaining his strength, his energy returning in ways Daniel hadn't expected. The transplant had worked. Mike was starting a new chapter in his life, one where the weight of kidney disease no longer hung over him. His laughter came easier now, and his smile had a new brightness to it. Daniel, on the other hand, was still recovering. The pain from the surgery lingered longer than he anticipated. Every small movement was a reminder of the sacrifice he had made. But there were no regrets. Watching Mike bounce back was all that mattered to him. It felt like the right thing to do, like he had saved his friend's life. But something else was changing, something subtle and hard to ignore. Emily, who had always been part of their tight-knit group, became more involved in Mike's recovery than Daniel expected. She was always there, stopping by to visit him, spending hours with him when Daniel was at home resting. At first, Daniel didn't think much of it. Emily was Mike's wife, after all, and she had every right to be involved. But the more time went on, the more he noticed that these visits seemed to stretch longer than before. Their conversations grew deeper, and there were moments when Daniel would come into the room and find them laughing together, looking a little too comfortable. Daniel tried to brush it off, convincing himself that Emily and Mike were just close. It wasn't unusual for a couple to spend time together, especially after something so life-changing. But deep down, he couldn't shake the odd feeling gnawing at him. Maybe I'm just being paranoid, he thought. They're family. It's normal. As the weeks went by, the atmosphere between the three of them began to shift. Daniel noticed something in Emily that he hadn't before. She became distant, spending more time on her phone, withdrawn into her own world. The lively energy she once brought to their home seemed to fade. Conversations became short, and her smile didn't seem as genuine. At first, Daniel thought it was just the stress of everything, Mike's recovery, their busy lives. But it didn't feel like that. Something had changed. Emily's attentiveness toward Mike seemed to intensify, while her presence around Daniel began to fade. She was often absorbed in her phone, scrolling endlessly. It wasn't just Emily's behavior that unsettled Daniel. Mike, too, began acting differently. He'd cancel plans last minute, always with some excuse. He stopped returning Daniel's calls as quickly, and when they did speak, his responses were brief. Daniel's mind began to churn with questions. Then, one night, it all came to a head. Daniel was at home, still recovering, when he noticed Emily's phone lying on the table. She had left it unattended. Normally, Daniel wouldn't have thought much of it, but a strange feeling tugged at him. With hesitation, he unlocked it, his heart racing as the screen revealed a series of messages. They weren't just friendly texts. They were intimate, coded words, a tone that suggested more than mere friendship. But it wasn't just the messages. Later that week, Daniel ran into an old friend who had seen something unsettling. The friend mentioned how they had seen Emily and Mike together late one night, alone, laughing, far too close for comfort. They hadn't thought much of it at the time, but seeing Daniel's stunned reaction, they hesitated and then confirmed. They were together, Daniel. Just the two of them. The pieces began to fall into place. What had seemed like small, odd moments now felt like clear signs of something more. Daniel couldn't deny the feeling gnawing at him. The bond he thought was unbreakable, the trust he had placed in both of them, was now in question. The cracks were starting to show, but Daniel wasn't ready to confront them yet. He needed answers. answers that would either confirm or shatter everything he had believed. The audience, however, was already ahead of Daniel, seeing the pieces coming together faster than he could. The tension was palpable, and what was once a simple story of sacrifice now looked like it was about to spiral into something far more complicated. Daniel couldn't ignore the signs anymore. He had seen enough, heard enough, and felt the weight of the truth pressing on him. He confronted Emily, his heart heavy with the knowledge he hoped wasn't true. She denied everything at first, insisting there was nothing between her and Mike. But her nervousness, the way she avoided his gaze, told him everything he needed to know. Though she insisted he was just imagining things, Daniel could feel that the trust they had was gone. He didn't press her further. What more was there to say when everything had already been laid bare in their silence? The next step was Mike. Daniel found him sitting alone at home, calm, almost too calm. When Daniel asked about the relationship with Emily, Mike's response was dismissive, almost indifferent. He suggested that it just happened and that Daniel hadn't been there for Emily the way he should have. The words hit Daniel like a cold wave. Daniel didn't shout, didn't rage. He stood there, feeling a quiet devastation seep into his bones. It wasn't anger that consumed him. It was the quiet realization of betrayal. Mike wasn't just someone Daniel had once called a friend. He had taken something irreplaceable, something deeper than Daniel could have prepared for. He had given Mike life, but in return, Mike had taken everything else. The days that followed the confrontation felt like an emotional storm that never settled. Daniel moved out of the apartment he had shared with Emily. The weight of the betrayal was unbearable, and he couldn't stay there a moment longer. He filed for divorce, though the legal steps felt hollow, as if they could never fix the gaping wound inside him. His world, once built on trust and loyalty, had come crashing down, leaving only isolation in its place. Mike never reached out to apologize. Neither did Emily. The silence from both of them spoke volumes, but Daniel couldn't bring himself to be surprised. They had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. They had taken from him something irreplaceable, and now they were gone. The story leaked online. People quickly began to weigh in, and the reactions were split. Some couldn't fathom how Mike, someone who had received so much from Daniel, could betray him in such a cruel way. Can someone really be that cold? They asked. Others couldn't believe Emily's involvement in the affair, especially after everything Daniel had sacrificed for both of them. He gave him a second chance at life, and this is what he did with it? Was a common sentiment. But the most haunting question lingered in Daniel's mind. Why do people betray those who love them most? It was a question that seemed to have no clear answer. Was it a lapse in judgment? A moment of weakness? Or was there something deeper, something about human nature that led to such betrayal? Daniel couldn't shake the thought. He tried to find clarity, but every time he thought he had an answer, another layer of the situation peeled back, revealing more pain and confusion. In his isolation, Daniel spent hours reflecting, but there was no easy explanation. The betrayal had shaken him to his core. Mike had been like a brother, and Emily, his partner. Both of them had shared his most intimate moments, and yet they had turned their backs on him in the worst way possible. As Daniel drifted further into his thoughts, the question of why became an obsession. Why had Mike, who owed him his life, acted in such a callous manner? Why had Emily, the woman he loved, chosen to betray him with his best friend? The audience, now fully immersed in the story, begins to reflect with Daniel. The betrayal isn't just a personal tragedy, it becomes a universal question. Why do people hurt those who offer them unconditional love? And what drives us to betray the ones who would do anything for us? Daniel's story sparked a deeper exploration into human nature. Experts began discussing what causes people to betray those closest to them, focusing on the psychological wounds that drive such actions. Betrayal is often tied to deep emotional pain or selfish desires, and it can break a person not only emotionally but psychologically as well. Psychologists explained how narcissistic tendencies might lead to a lack of empathy and how people sometimes act out of self-interest, even at the cost of others' trust. For Mike, it seemed that his betrayal wasn't just a single lapse in judgment, but a manifestation of deeper selfishness. However, this didn't make his actions any less painful for Daniel. The conversation shifted to the internal struggles that often accompany betrayal, the moral confusion that occurs when someone knows they've done something wrong but chooses to ignore it. The idea that Mike might have been able to justify his actions to himself added another layer to the story. But no matter how hard one tries to excuse betrayal, it's still a decision to hurt someone who's trusted you. Soon, the story took on a broader meaning. Other people shared their own experiences of betrayal, each one with its own nuances but linked by the same deep sense of hurt. These accounts weren't identical to Daniel's situation, but they shared a common thread. Betrayal wasn't rare. It was something many had experienced in some form. As these stories unfolded, a bigger question began to emerge. Why do people betray those who love them the most? Is it a flaw within the human heart, or is it a reflection of something deeper, like unresolved pain? The exploration of this question caused viewers to reflect on their own experiences. Everyone, in one way or another, has felt the sting of betrayal. Some may have experienced it in relationships, others in friendships, and some perhaps in their own families. These reflections invited viewers to ponder whether betrayal is a result of personal pain or something more inherent in human nature. In the aftermath of the betrayal, Daniel began his journey toward healing. The anger and hurt slowly gave way to reflection. He sought therapy, where he started to understand the emotional toll the whole experience had taken on him. Through these sessions, Daniel learned to focus on his own well-being and rebuild his sense of self-worth. He started writing about his journey, expressing his pain, but also his growth. It became a way for him to let go of the past and focus on moving forward. Volunteering with transplant patients also became a turning point. By helping others who were facing similar challenges, Daniel turned his suffering into something meaningful. His involvement gave him a new sense of purpose, and he realized that while he had lost those closest to him, he had gained a deeper understanding of who he was. Though the betrayal still lingered, it no longer defined him. Through this journey, Daniel found resilience. He came to understand that healing was not about forgetting, but about finding strength through the pain. He may have lost them, but in doing so, he found himself. As the story unfolds, Daniel's journey leaves us with a powerful question. What would you do if someone you trusted with your life, the very person you sacrificed for, betrayed you in the worst possible way? Would you be able to find it in your heart to forgive them? Or would the hurt be too much to overcome? Imagine yourself in Daniel's shoes. After giving a part of yourself, literally, to save a friend's life, only to have that same friend turn his back on you. Would you still hold on to the bond, or would you walk away and never look back? The choice isn't simple, and it's something many of us may never have to face, but it's still worth considering. What would you do in a situation like this? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Would you seek revenge, try to rebuild, or cut all ties for good? Let's hear your take on betrayal and forgiveness. And before you go, be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. Your support helps keep these stories going, and we love to hear from you.